Vivid verses.
The call came on a Tuesday, which I remember because I was in the middle of reviewing a contract that had three separate clauses designed to obscure a single liability, and I'd been enjoying the process of untangling them. Nadia's name on the screen didn't feel like an interruption. It felt like a different kind of puzzle. "I need to see you," she said. "Not can I see you. Not are you free." Need. Present tense, active voice. No room for negotiation built into the sentence structure. I noted that. "Tonight?" I asked. "Yes. Come over." I finished the clause first, made a note in the margin, then drove to her apartment. We'd been together long enough that I had a key, but still knocked. She'd established that preference early on. It's my space, even with you in it, and I'd respected it without commentary. Rules tell you things. Not always what the person intends, but always something. She opened the door in a gray sweater I recognized, the sleeves pulled over her hands. That was new. Nadia had been raised in a warm household, emotionally expressive in a way that I'd always found interesting to observe, and she rarely pulled inward unless she was preparing to deliver something difficult. The sweater sleeve maneuver was self-soothing. Noted. "Glass of water?" she asked. "Sure." The kitchen was clean in a way it wasn't usually clean at 8 in the evening. She'd tidied. Another preparation signal. She handed me the glass, then sat across from me at the small kitchen table rather than next to me on the couch, which was where we normally sat. Distance. Formality. She was staging the conversation. "Okay," I thought. "Let's see what we're actually doing here. I have to tell you something," she said. I put the glass down slowly, not to be dramatic, but because I wanted my hands free and my posture neutral. "All right, I was with someone else." She said it fast, like she'd been holding it in her chest and needed it out. "About 4 months ago. It lasted about 3 weeks. It's over." She watched me. I watched her. The silence stretched, and she seemed to expect that I would fill it with something. Volume, hurt, accusation. When I didn't, she added, "I'm pregnant." And there it was. 4 months ago. 3 weeks. Pregnant. I didn't do the math out loud. I did in my head in roughly 4 seconds, and what came out of it was a probability distribution rather than a certainty, but probability distributions have weight. The math wasn't conclusive. It was merely suggestive. And suggestive was enough to change the architecture of this conversation entirely. "How far along?" I asked. She hesitated a beat too long. "About 14 weeks. 14 weeks. 3.5 months. She said the affair ended 4 months ago. She said it lasted 3 weeks. 14 weeks ago would put conception at the beginning or middle of the affair, not safely outside it. I didn't say any of this. I said, "Okay, okay," she repeated. "I heard you." She leaned forward slightly. "I know this is a lot. I know you must be. Are you upset? You seem very calm." "I'm calm," I agreed. "Because you could be upset, Theo. You can say something." My name is Theodore, and she'd been calling me Theo since our 3rd month together, which I'd allowed because it felt like an intimacy rather than a diminishment. Now the name landed differently. It was an invitation to perform the role she'd written for me. The wounded but forgiving partner, the man whose love was unconditional enough to absorb this and still hold. I wonder, I thought, what version of me she's been rehearsing this conversation with. "I'm processing," I said, which was true. I ended it as soon as I knew it was a mistake. I told him it was over. "I came to you because," she stopped. "Start again. "I'm telling you because I love you and I want us to figure this out together." Together. That word was doing heavy lifting. She'd introduced a potential third party into the definition of us, reframed the question of parenthood as a unit project rather than a biological clarification, and wrapped it in the language of partnership. That was elegant, if you weren't paying attention. I was paying attention. "Does he know?" I asked. A flicker. I told him it was over. He knows that. She hadn't answered what I'd asked. Does he know you're pregnant? No. Okay. She waited. Then, say something, Theo. Please. You told me the truth, I said. That matters to me. And I meant that part. It did matter. The telling itself had value. What I was less sure about was whether the truth she'd told me was the whole truth or a curated selection designed to land in a particular way. I need some time. Of course, she said quickly, the way you agreed is something because the alternative, me walking out, me not coming back, is worse than whatever concession the agreement costs. I drove home and sat in my car for about 12 minutes before going inside. The following 2 weeks were quieter than they should have been. Nadia and I spoke regularly, had dinner twice, and she was warm and present in a way that felt performative in a very specific direction. She was showing me what this could look like, the family version, the life that continued from here. She talked about the pregnancy in the first person plural. We need to think about space. We should figure out finances. I listened. I noted. I did not ask about paternity again. That was deliberate. Silence on a question isn't the same as abandoning it. My brother Cam called on a Thursday evening, and I told him what was happening because Cam is the only person I know whose advice is worth less than zero, but whose presence when I'm thinking aloud is genuinely useful. He's a bad advisor and an excellent sounding board. She told you there was someone else, he said. That's not nothing. She could have just not said anything. True, but you don't believe her. I believe she told me. I'm less certain about what she told me and why. You think the kid's not yours. I think the timing is ambiguous. Theo, Cam said, man, that's either your kid or it isn't. Those are not the same situation. I know. So ask her. She answered the question she wanted me to ask. I said. She told me there was someone else and it was over. She did not volunteer what I'd actually need to know. Cam was quiet for a moment. Then, what are you going to do? Wait and see what she asked for. He made a sound that wasn't quite agreement. You've always been weird about this. The watching and waiting thing. It's not weird. It's just patient. It's like you're playing chess with people. I'm not playing anything, I said. I'm just not moving until I understand the board. What she asked for came 5 weeks later, on a Saturday morning over coffee at her kitchen table, where she had placed, very deliberately, a folder of papers. I've been looking at the hospital costs, she said. She opened the folder. Clean printouts, organized by category. Labor and delivery, prenatal care, anesthesiology, facility fees. The total at the bottom of one summary sheet had been highlighted in yellow. $40,000. That's a significant number, I said. I know. She folded her hands. I've been thinking about this a lot. My insurance covers some of it, but there's still a gap. I'm not trying to put this all on you. The word all was doing something there. But I thought, as the father, it would make sense for you to be part of covering this. To show that you're committed. To show that we're in this together. Show. The transaction was being framed as proof of commitment. That was a construction I found interesting. As a gesture, she added. That's how I'm thinking about it. I looked at the folder. The numbers were real. The framing was something else. She wanted $40,000. She wanted my signature, and she'd wrapped it in the language of fatherhood, which was designed to make refusal feel like abandonment rather than reasonable caution. She hasn't mentioned a paternity test, I noted, which is conspicuous. I want to do this right, I said. She smiled. I knew you'd understand. So before I sign anything or contribute to medical costs, I want to run a paternity test. The smile didn't fall. It reorganized. What? A paternity test. Prenatal, non-invasive. It's very straightforward at this stage. You're serious. Yes. She closed the folder slowly. When she looked up, there was something in her expression that I'd only seen a few times. Not hurt, not anger, but recalibration. She was reassessing something. Theo, I told you what happened. I told you the truth. I know you did. And you still don't trust me. This isn't about trust. It's about accuracy. I kept my voice even. You told me there was an overlap in timing. The paternity question is genuinely open. That's just what the timeline produces. A test resolves it cleanly for everyone. For everyone, she repeated, and there was an edge in it. You mean for you? I mean that if the child is mine, there's no reason not to confirm it. And if there's any reason not to confirm it, then I should know that too. She stood up from the table. She went to the window, and I waited. I can't believe, she said, carefully, that you're making this about whether you trust me when I came to you. I came to you. I told you the truth. I didn't have to do that. I'm grateful that you did. It doesn't feel like it. I understand that, I said. My answer is still yes to being involved, yes to covering costs, with a paternity confirmation first. That's the condition. A condition. She said the word like it tasted wrong. You're putting a condition on whether you step up for your own child. My own child. She'd chosen that phrase, and she was watching me when she said it, and I recognized that she was testing whether it would destabilize me, whether the language of fatherhood would override the logic of verification. It didn't. If the child is mine, I said, then the test confirms that, and we move forward. No harm done. If she said, if. Nadia. She turned around. There were tears forming, which I observed with a kind of sadness that was genuine. I wasn't unmoved by her distress. I just wasn't moved off my position by it. Those are different things. How could you do this to me right now? Her voice was low. I'm pregnant. I'm scared. I came to you because you're who I love, and you're treating me like a suspect. I'm treating you like a person whose statement about timing I need to verify before making a $40,000 decision. It's not $40,000 to you, Theo. That's nothing to you. This is about punishment. Punishment. She'd shifted frames again. Now I wasn't a cautious partner. I was a man inflicting pain as retribution. That was a useful reframe for her because it cast the test as cruelty rather than clarity. It's not punishment, I said. It's a reasonable standard. One test, then everything she asked for. She looked at me for a long moment. And if I say no, then I'll understand why you said no, I said, and I'll make my decisions accordingly. She said nothing. I stood, picked up my jacket, and told her to think about it and let me know. She called twice that evening and once the following morning. I answered the second call. I've been thinking, she said. Her voice was composed, which meant she'd made a decision about how to approach this. I understand why you asked. I don't agree with it, but I understand. And I love you, and I want us to get past this. Okay, I said. Can we put the test idea aside and start from the assumption that we're partners? That we're doing this together? Start from the assumption. She wanted me to elect certainty without earning it. The test isn't an expression of doubt about you personally, I said. It's just how I need to do this. If that changes, I'll let you know. A pause. You're not going to budge on this. No. Another pause. Longer. Okay, she said finally, and the word was quiet and slightly clipped, which meant she was filing it away rather than resolving it. I recognized that she had not agreed to the test. She had simply stopped arguing about it for now. 3 weeks passed. She didn't raise the medical costs again. She didn't raise the test. She moved our dinners to her place exclusively, and when I was there, she was warm in a way that was clearly calibrated, attentive without being cloying, affectionate without being desperate. She was running a campaign. I didn't engage with it, and I didn't resist it. I simply remained where I'd been, watching. Then her sister called me. Lena, 2 years older than Nadia, perpetually positioned as the family's voice of reason, and someone I'd always found I trusted to be honest about what she wanted from any given conversation. She asked if I could come by for a coffee, just her and me, and I said yes. We sat at a cafe table near her apartment, and she ordered herbal tea and looked at me with an expression I recognized as rehearsed sympathy. "I know you two are going through something," she said. "We're working through it." She told me about the test thing. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I hope you'll hear me out, because I'm not taking sides. I love my sister, and I think she made a mistake, and I think she's trying to do the right thing now." "I hear that. She loves you, Theo. Whatever happened, and I know something happened, she told me. She chose you. She came back to you. That should count for something." "It does count," I said honestly. I told her it did. "So why the test?" I looked at Lena for a moment. She was leaning slightly forward, which meant she was invested in my answer and expected it to be something she could use. I decided to be direct. "Because the timeline is ambiguous and the costs are significant, and I want to know what I'm agreeing to before I agree to it," I said. "That's the entire answer. It's not complicated." She sat back slightly. "She thinks you don't trust her. That's what she says. But the test doesn't require trust or distrust. It requires information. Either the child is mine or it isn't. Both outcomes have consequences. I'd like to know which one I'm dealing with." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in a slightly different register, "And if it isn't yours?" I looked at her. "Then I'll know that." She studied me. Something shifted in her expression. Not disapproval exactly, but recognition. She'd come here expecting to appeal to my affection and gotten logic instead, and I could see her reassessing the likelihood that the conversation would produce the outcome she'd hoped for. "She's scared," Lena said, quieter now. "She's really scared. I understand that. That should matter to you." "It does. It doesn't change what I need." She looked at her tea. "You're very certain." "I'm very clear," I said. "Those aren't the same thing." We finished our drinks, and she gave me a hug before I left, which felt genuine and slightly sad. Nadia agreed to the test 2 days later, in a text message that said only, "Fine. Set it up." I didn't read emotion into the brevity. I scheduled the appointment, covered the cost of the test without being asked, and texted her the details. She showed up. We sat in the waiting room without touching. When the technician called us in, I sat in the corner chair while she sat on the table. She looked at the ceiling during the blood draw. I looked at my hands. On the drive out, she said, "I hope you're happy." I didn't answer. "That was humiliating," she added. "I'm sorry it felt that way. That wasn't my intention." "What was your intention?" "To know." She looked out the window. "You've already decided, haven't you? What you'll do, depending on the results." I hadn't told her this, but it was true. Both branches of the outcome had been mapped. I've been living inside those maps for weeks. "I'm clear about what I need," I said again. "That's not an answer." "I know." She turned to look at me. "Do you love me?" I took a breath. "What I feel for you hasn't changed. What I know about you has." She was silent for the rest of the drive. The results arrived in a patient portal on a Wednesday, and I read them alone, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I didn't finish. The probability of paternity was listed as 0%. I read the line twice, not from disbelief, but from the habit of confirming before concluding. The number was unambiguous. The child was not mine. The timeline I'd constructed in my head 4 months ago, in the silence of Nadia's kitchen, had been accurate. What I'd suspected from the first conversation was confirmed in clear digital type on a Wednesday morning. I sat with it for about 10 minutes. It wasn't grief exactly. It was something adjacent to it, a kind of settling, the way a building sounds when its structure finishes contracting in cold air. Something releasing tension. Not painful, just final. I thought about Nadia at the table with her highlighted folder. The word gesture. The way she'd said your own child while watching my face for the thing that would override my caution. She had known. She must have known, or at minimum suspected, that the child wasn't mine. The math was too obvious for a woman who had lived inside that timeline for months. She'd come to me anyway. She'd framed $40,000 as proof of love. She'd brought her sister to the conversation. She'd stood in that waiting room while the test was taken and still not told me the truth in her own words. Not a single moment of unsolicited honesty. She told me about the affair. That was true. But she'd told me in a context designed to absorb the disclosure within a larger ask. Yes, there was someone else, but does paternity really matter when you love her and want this family? The confession had been a play, not a reckoning. I forwarded the results to my phone, then made a call. Not to Nadia, to the hospital billing department. I explained that I would not be a responsible party for the account in question. I gave them the information they needed. They thanked me and told me the account would remain in the patient's name. I thanked them and hung up. I didn't call Nadia immediately. I waited until that evening because I wanted the conversation to be at the time of my choosing rather than the time of her suspense, and because I had nothing urgent to say. I wasn't angry. I wasn't composing accusations. I had one thing to communicate, and I could do it calmly and completely in under 2 minutes. She answered on the second ring. "I got the results," I said. Silence. "The child isn't mine." The silence continued for a moment. Then she said, "Theo, I want to say one thing, and I'd ask that you let me finish." I paused. "What I feel for you is real. It doesn't change what's true. You had a chance to tell me the whole truth from the beginning, and you built something else instead. I want you to know that I understand why you did it. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying I can see the shape of what happened, and I can't stay inside it. You don't understand the whole. I understand what I need to. Please." Her voice changed register, lower, softer. "Please, we can talk about this. There's more you don't know. About what he did, about why I—" "That's not mine to hear," I said. "Whatever happened with him is between you and him. The billing department has been updated. You won't receive anything from me. Theo, the bills are in your name. You said you'd." I said I'd cover costs with a paternity confirmation. The confirmation came back. "You heard the condition when I stated it." She was quiet. "Then, you knew. Before the test. You knew, and you made me go through that." I suspected. The test confirmed. Those aren't the same thing, and the test was necessary. "You're doing this to punish me." "No, I'm doing this because it's true." She tried again. The conversation cycled through 3 or 4 different emotional registers. Wounded, then firm, then quietly pleading, then briefly cold. I listened to each one. I didn't interrupt. I didn't add fuel. I didn't perform cruelty because none of this required performance. When she'd finished, I said, "I hope you're okay. I mean that. Don't say that to me right now." "All right. Is this—" She stopped. Started. "Is this it? You're just done?" "Yes." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she laughed, but it wasn't laughter. I thought you'd stay. I thought if I just gave you enough time." "I know you thought that. How are you this calm?" "Because there's nothing to be angry about," I said. I understood what was happening. I waited to confirm it. "Now it's confirmed. That's all this is." "That's all." She stopped. The line went quiet in the way that means someone has run out of the argument they prepared and landed in the place underneath it. "Take care of yourself," I said. I ended the call. Cam called 2 weeks later, and I told him how it had ended. 0%, he said. "That's definitive." Yes. She had to have known. She had to have suspected. Whether she knew for certain, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. 40 grand, Cam said. He exhaled. "She looked at you and thought she could. She looked at me and thought love would function as a variable I couldn't control," I said. "She thought if she offered me the version of the future I'd want, the family, the child, the commitment, I'd choose to believe the story that came with it. And you didn't." "I didn't." A pause. Then Cam said, in the tone he uses when he's about to say something that embarrasses him, "I'm not always sure whether to feel sorry for the people who try that on you." "Why?" because they don't know what they're walking into. You don't show them anything. You just wait. It's not a strategy, I said. It's just what's accurate. The clearer you see something, the less you need to perform around it. See, that's exactly the kind of thing you say that makes me feel like I'm talking to a slightly different species. You're not. You're not normal, Theo. Maybe not, I said, but I'm right. He laughed, the real kind. Yeah, he said, you were right. I thought about the folder on her kitchen table sometimes, in the weeks after, the yellow highlighter, the way she'd organized those papers, assembled the argument in physical form, set it in front of me like an exhibit. There had been real effort in that, real preparation. She'd spent time building the case. What she hadn't calculated was that I'd already been building a different one. Not to use against her. I want to be precise about this. I wasn't running a counter-operation. I was simply maintaining the habit I'd always had, the one Cam calls watching and waiting, and I call understanding before acting. I'd heard the confession. I noted what was said and what wasn't. I'd done the arithmetic in my head and found it pointing somewhere inconvenient, and I'd filed it away and waited to see whether the inconvenient possibility would be resolved by more information or confirmed by it. It was confirmed by a test she agreed to when she realized I wouldn't move without it. I wondered sometimes whether she'd taken a gamble on the test, whether some part of her had thought maybe the numbers don't work the way I think they do, maybe the timing could go either way, maybe. That kind of hope, the irrational but persistent kind, is human enough that I don't judge it. People do that. They carry a small, improbable possibility like a coin in a pocket and reach for it when they need to. The pocket had been empty. I didn't feel triumph about that. I felt a clean kind of sorrow, the kind that doesn't beg for resolution. Something had been real, and then something had been revealed, and the two things were incompatible, and I'd had the clarity to choose the truth over the comfort of the story. That's not wisdom exactly. It's just a way of being in the world. Eyes open, conclusions suspended, decisions made on what's actually there rather than what you'd prefer to find. Some people can't do it. They want so much to believe the version that costs them less. I've never been able to make myself believe what isn't true. I've tried, when I was younger, and it never held. The math kept surfacing. The timeline kept presenting itself. The questions I hadn't asked would sit in a corner of my awareness like a patient visitor, waiting. Better to ask the questions. Better to sit with the possibility that the answer is the wrong one, and then find out, and then know. $40,000 she'd asked for, as a gesture, as proof that I was ready to be a father. I'd been ready to be a father, if it had been mine to be. It wasn't. The invoice sat in her name at the hospital billing office, and the only thing that had changed since her kitchen table presentation was that I now had clarity instead of suspicion, which is a poor trade from her perspective and the only acceptable one from mine. I drove home from Cam's that evening with the window cracked despite the cold, and the air came in sharp and clean, and I thought about nothing in particular for about 20 minutes, which is the closest I get to peace.
Thanks for listening.